Last week's parashah, she showed the menorah lampstand, wasn't it? It was a symbol of the light of revelation and truth, which points to and was revealed in Yeshua as the light of the world, and which actually began with Israel. And the fire reminds us of God refining his people so that we will be as pure as gold. And a number of the scriptures that we read today just continued on in that vein as well. We're then reminded that it's not by might nor by power, but by my spirit. Yeah, it says Yahweh, Tzavot, the Lord of hosts. Zechariah 4, verse 6. We were reminded about the importance of the pattern of Pesach and God's purposes. The firstborns of Egypt were Jewish people in Egypt were effectively the sacrifice for its disobedience, though the firstborns of Egypt itself were. And the challenge to God of Israel. And the firstborns of Israel, the opposite, were actually then redeemed and purchased by God through the protection of the blood of the lambs killed for the first Pesach. And then the firstborns were then substituted with the tribe of Levi to redeem them from the curse of Yaakov, to be in a permanent service to God and the people of Israel in assisting with regular sacrifice. God has a plan right through. Right? He says that if we, everyone's mucked up at different times, and then he thought, well, okay, it's all right. I've got some things in place, and then he was just waiting on them to make sure that they, redeem themselves a bit. And how do they do that? By not participating with every other Israelite at the time of the golden calf. God says, I have a people that will be able to now assist everyone else. So he swapped them over. Pretty cool. Redeemed them. Life's about redemption, isn't it? It's really, really good. And it's important that we understand the importance of even redeeming each other rather than throwing each other under the bus. Likewise, in AD 30, Yeshua became the substitute lamb for the redemption, once and for all for Israel and all mankind. And gratitude wasn't part of their language at this time. God had to deal with this issue a number of times. And this continued actually through their phase of their journey. And life is a journey. And it's called sanctification. Changing, continually changing into the likeness of Messiah Yeshua. Well, this week's Parashah Shlach L'kha send on your behalf. Many of the scriptures that we covered, there was a number of different items in there. Grumblers won't enter the land. And, grumblers, well, they come unstuck here as well, don't they? And we talked a lot about the 12 scouts who went out, and only 2 did the right thing or had enough trust in God rather than in themselves. Then there was a fragrant aromas to Adonai. What does that look like? The importance of the things that we do being pleasant to God constantly. And then it talks about unintentional versus defiant sin, and we've covered that often in the past as well. And just the last thing was the tzitzi for holiness. And it's one of my favourite stories actually in the scriptures where the woman actually reached out and touched Yeshua's garments, touched his tzitzit, and the issue of blood that she had suffered for many years, it stopped. And it was because of her faith and reaching out. And that's one of the really important things, is that Yeshua wants us to reach out in faith. He wants us to actually see things happen. And it's important that we actually do that. Reach out, touch his garment, and don't make a big thing of it. Just get down and do it. And interesting enough, just on that topic, the tzitzit, you'll notice the majority of modern Orthodox garments and etc. actually don't have a blue strand in it. And it's just another one of those things that unfortunately the rabbis through the centuries think they know better than what God's word says. Because it says to put a strand, a blue strand. And the argument is about what sort of blue. Because where can you get that particular type of blue? Because it only comes from a very special mollusk. And if there's not enough around, and it goes on. I mean, goodness sake. It just says it will be your own tzitzit. So whenever you look at it, this is part of the equation. One of the interesting things is, I know we knock the Catholic, the Roman Catholics for their beads, right? But there isn't actually a certain point in it. I know that what goes with it is a slight issue because of who it's praying to. However, it is a great thing to actually have a reminder. And so from that angle, they kind of got it right. That is really important. Many Roman Catholics, they understand the importance of having a reminder of who God is. And what it says here, it says, so whenever you look at them, right? So right and wrong on some of the other things, when you look at them, you will remember all the mitzvot of Adonai and do them, and not go spying out after your own hearts and your own eyes and prostituting yourselves. Well, that's a pretty stroppy word. But of course, it's prostituting. It means to another god or to other aspects. But the interesting thing is, because it talks about, it says, this way you will remember and obey all my mitzvot, and you will be holy to your God. And it's one of those little things that it's important that sometimes, most of us kind of do need some reminders, because, situations arise or difficulties occur. And the importance of the tzitzit is not just for you. It's an interesting one that because most things are done in secret and in private, and most people actually, well, of course, you know that God sees all things, but that kind of spins out of your head most times. And you say, well, no one else sees it. But the thing is, it's quite important actually that you actually see it. Whoops, hang on, I'm supposed to be sold out. Whoops, hang on, I'm supposed to be walking this path. And so one of the things is with it, it's not just for you, but it's also some of the things that we do when others look on. They look on and they then say, "Oh, okay, so you're one of those. So you need to be walking rightly." So it's an interesting one as part of it. There should be some aspect about us. Most of us like to walk or live incognito because then no one can point a finger. And there's a double whammy, of course, is that make sure that if you wear something or do something that's supposed to equate with righteousness and holiness, make sure that you actually live up to it. Otherwise, it does reflect badly on God, who you're trying to represent or talk about. And that's some kind of a reason why some people don't like to have that things shown, so that they can actually just sort of sneak through life without anyone looking on them and thinking, oh, I thought they were a follower of Yeshua. Okay. You know, we don't want to be stumbling blocks, do we? Because it says we're a stumbling block to one of the smallest. What does it say? You may as well stick something around your neck and throw it, jump in the sea. You won't go there. But it's important that we are representatives. And it's interesting, a lot of people, they kind of look, and the Orthodox, the Rabbinic Jews have made the position that it's only actually for men. But actually, scripturally, it actually doesn't say anywhere. And also, they do give concession to many of the things in the scriptures to women, that you don't have to do this and you don't have to do that because of the compensation of time. And but the interesting thing is, you know, for some people, it's voluntary, it's a choice. And so don't worry, I'm not advocating that everyone walks around with tsitsi or everything else. That's totally up between you and God. But it's one of those sort of things that I've changed my views on different things over time, and reading the scriptures and different things, and just thinking, well, okay, that's kind of for me what God requires, and that's often how we should see things. And so, you know, and same for women. One of the interesting things is actually doesn't say you can't. So there, that makes it more comfortable for you. And but definitely, it was something that the woman with the issue of blood recognised and saw it, and recognised, hey, that there must be some power there, and she was healed. So, if you need healing, you need a touch, maybe something out of the ordinary, or something strange, or something different, ask God, you know, what could actually assist you, rather than what everyone else thinks. Adonai Elion knew beforehand what would actually happen. And this is to do with Yehoshua, the tribe of Ephraim. Moshe actually changed his name from Hosea. And Caleb from the tribe of Yehuda. Some of my favorite passages as well. They actually went against the tide of opinion. And they reaped the reward of being the only two men of their generation to actually enter the promised land. And even today, there's lots of different opinions and different tides and different things that run through. Well, ask God, to guide you. And if He says, don't run with the tide of opinion, then do so. You know, run His tide, run the way He wants to, And you will come unstuck with a lot of those who think you should actually, toe the line. But it's important that you actually walk your walk before God and how He's instructed you. So that's what comes to obedience is better than any sacrifice that we do. Yaakov effectively prophesied the beginnings when he changed the order of authority of his sons in Genesis 48 and 49. And Yehuda received the main leadership role of the family. The blessings, the scepter to the world, would actually come down his line, his lineage forever. And the second in charge would be Ephraim, Joseph's younger son. And hence it's interesting that in the first instance, Yehoshua was actually first in charge and was the conqueror of Canaan. That's Numbers 13, 18. And his descendants, Jeroboam, was actually king of Israel during the northern kingdom. And the name of Ephraim is often used to signify the whole kingdom. And Caleb, he served under Yehoshua, with the outcome that his descendant, King David, who was the king of Judah, firstly of the southern kingdoms, actually regained the leadership as prophesied. So it was flicked, flicked back again. It's interesting how it works, isn't it? Zechariah prophesies the reuniting of Ephraim and Yehuda. It is Adonai Elohim who, in bestowing his blessings on his people, gives more to some than to others. More gifts, graces, comforts, and more of the good things of life. He often gives most to those who are least likely. He chooses the weak things of the world. He raises the poor out of the dust. And grace observes not the order of nature, nor does God prefer those whom he thinks is the fittest to preferred, but it is actually as people please him. Now, the 12 tribes, the 12 spies from Israel, represent each of the tribes. They likely went to Canaan in the mid to late July. That is when the grapes are ripening. There's some pretty amazing pictures of grapes from Eshcol. That's the Eshcol Valley. And the interesting thing is that's actually where a lot of the amazing looking grapes actually do grow even now. And they're incredible. The size of them, you're just the bunches. You'll be amazed. Not like our little ones. Anyway, the spies, they brought back pomegranates and figs. And these fruit, they actually grow very much in abundance in Israel today. It's a miracle. Since this land actually lay barren and lifeless for almost 2,000 years. The fact that the land of Israel is fruitful again is the evidence of God's great mercy and his grace, as well as his faithfulness to his covenant promises. And the scriptures do talk about, for many centuries, the Jewish people will be wandering and they will be blinded. Then it says, then I will draw them back. Then I will do this. Then I will change the things back to what they originally knew, so that they will know that I am the one true God. In actual fact, some of the readings actually today reminded us of that as well. And knowing that Elohim had promised to give them the land. Now, that should have been good enough to proceed. Now, don't forget, this promise actually began with Avram, 430 years before Israel actually arrived at Mount Sinai. It's a long period of time, half a century. What was it for? Half a millennium, I mean, in a century, half a millennium. Wow. It's almost how many kilometres our van has done. Actually, it's done more than that. It's done 450,000. This stumbling at the seemingly final gate by yet another generation caused by 10 of the 12 spies actually had its parallel origins some 9 generations earlier in the story of Yosef and the 10 of the 12 sons of Yaakov. So was this history repeating itself? Yosef was sent by Yaakov to check up, to spy on his brothers, and that's how they saw it anyway, to make sure that all was well and good and report back. But because of the 10 brothers, the actions, a whole nation actually ended up being uprooted from the promised land, with 10 generations dying in foreign lands. Amazing. Unfortunately for the first generation out of Egypt, democracy actually won the day, 10-2, and befell the same fate as previously. Sadly, the 10 inspired fear rather than faith. Rather than focusing on the great fruitfulness of the land, they focused instead on the size of the inhabitants, in contrast to their own smallness. Think about it, a lot of the Israelites in that period were about just under 5 foot. In fact, if you go to a number of the places in Rome, etc., in the different catacombs, you'll actually find a lot of the not the mummies or the what do you call them, the bodies of people who have been preserved. That's how short they are. Even that period, a lot of people were actually quite short, and but they'd come up against these giants of the land. And giants, it could have been simply almost as tall as Daniel and Benjamin. In comparison, of course, they were a bit more beefy. They'd been to the gym a bit longer. But I don't know if they looked as handsome, though. So, it's kind of a pretty rugged lot, these Canaanites. So. And why were the spies scouting the land of Canaan for 40 years? Why not 30? Or why not 7? The number 40 is significant, as on one hand, already indicated a generation of 40 years. And on the other hand, numerically, it's the number of testing, preparation, and leadership, as well as the harbinger of something new. We see this pattern in the scriptures many times. In the dramatic new beginning, the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights before the waters stopped and the world repopulated. Moshe lived in Egypt for 40 years, was prepared for leadership in the Midian for 40 years before he actually led the Israelites. The Israelites were in the wilderness for 40 years as a new nation. Moshe fasted on the Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights before he went down the mountain with the 10 Commandments. And Moshe was there with Yahweh for 40 days and 40 nights without eating bread or drinking water. Now, most doctors and nurses wouldn't think that's actually possible. But it is, because he was sustained by God. Goliath challenged the Israelites twice a day for 40 days before David defeated him. And Yeshua was tested by Satan in the wilderness for 40 days before he began his public ministry. And then Yeshua was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted. He had fasted 40 days and 40 nights. Afterward, he was hungry. Now, when the tempter came to him, he said, "If you're the Son of God, command that those stones become bread." Well, then the period from resurrection of Yeshua to his ascension was 40 days, a period of preparing his disciples for the work that was laid ahead. Anyway, life is about choices with consequences. And because of Moshe's intercession and appeal to Yahweh's reputation and merciful nature, God relented from completely destroying the nation. Nevertheless, he decreed judgment on those who refused to trust in him the way that Joshua and Caleb actually had trusted in him. As it says, no one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. And hence that's actually what happened. It says, but because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and followed me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land. And it's one of those questions we need to ask ourselves, what sort of spirit do we have? What spirit do we allow ourselves to? I'm not talking necessarily just about the Holy Spirit. I'm talking about, our attitudes. How do we respond? How are we thinking? Are we thinking God's ways when we're dealing with issues in life? When circumstances come along? Or do we let the world take over our spirit as such? And we have a different response. We get narky. We don't keep our cool. The way we treat people, the way we speak, we let them wind us up, Or do we maintain our spirit softly? We need to believe that no matter what challenge we face today, we are able to overcome it with Yahweh's help. No matter what the situation. This is the kind of faith that pleases Yahweh. Without it, it is impossible to please him, it says in Hebrews 11, verse 6. As people of faith, we need to guard our speech and speak forth faith-filled words. Why did the whole community of Israel die in the wilderness? They reaped the fruit of their faithless, fearful words. And the people said many times, "We will surely die in the wilderness." And that's what happened. Adonai allowed them to speak their own future into existence. Yahweh said to them, he says, "As I live, just as you have spoken in my hearing." Now, the things we speak and the things we do, no one else may be around, but God is. He hears what you say. Here's what you do. And sometimes you say, "Well, I'll leave you to it." And then you come afterwards and you say, "Oh, God, please do this, please do this." And he says, "Well, hang about. Before I can do any of that, you need to undo the garbage you've just already spoken over yourself about things." So it's a challenge. Be careful what you say. You'll reap what you sow. Encourage yourself. That's what Paul says. Rav Shaul. Lift yourself up in the most holy faith, speaking to yourself in psalms and songs and spiritual songs, speaking in tongues, encouraging yourself, singing, rather than letting the things of the world wash your mind and your heart and your ears. No negative talk. It's hard to undo it once it's there in place. Man, Yeshua actually mentioned, that's right, further back here, it says, was interesting that after Moshe advised them of the consequences of their grumbling, they tried to backtrack. Look, let's go up to the place where Adonai promised, for we have sinned. Now this is, and this is often what we do. We recognize our sin and we try and backtrack, and he says, whoa, hang about. Too late. Too late. Your future was cast. And sometimes, unfortunately, you need to kind of live with it. He'll make it a bit easier, but that's sometimes the way it is. Make sure we retain the right spirit, even through it. No different than with Moshe. Man alive, there was quite a few years that he had to maintain a right spirit, knowing that he had missed out, far out. And he was known as the most humble man who ever lived and walked on the earth. He missed out. Doesn't mean your salvation. Doesn't mean you will necessarily, because he was still righteous. But some of the other things which which you thought you were going to see happen or do, sometimes we've cut the legs out of ourselves, and we have to live with it. Some of us don't like that, but that's what it is. Don't complain about it. Don't grumble about it. Keep the right spirit, and then you'll enjoy it. Okay, it might not be quite what you thought, but life has still got so much in it that sometimes we need to say, well, okay, that's what's been cut out for me. And and this is one of the saddest things, one of the hardest things with the prosperity teaching that's around the world today, is just name it, claim it, and she'll be right, mate. It doesn't work that way. The only ones that actually it works for are those that are actually blabbing it. That's the saddest thing out. And they rob so many people of enjoying what God has already done and provided and promised. And everything else is a bonus. Our expectations. We just need to sometimes just look and say, well, wow, we have been so blessed already. And just like, we need to get that word da'enu on our lips a bit more often. It was enough. It was enough. Man, we've been blessed already, especially in New Zealand. How much more do we want, actually? Man alive, we're a jolly bunch of grumblers. But we got it, we have enough. We've actually been spoiled and blessed in so many ways. And that's what's about, keeping that attitude right. So it doesn't matter, things may change, but that's not our focus. It doesn't become our focus. It's recognize what he's done. Yeshua said that it is by our words that we will be acquitted, and by our words we will be condemned. Matthew 12:37. May we be careful and deliberate in the words that we speak over ourselves and others, since faith comes by hearing. May our words and our actions be a testimony of the goodness and the greatness of Yahweh Eloheinu, the Lord our God. And may we take hold of his promises by faith. May these words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, Yahweh, my rock and my redeemer. Tehillim 19:14. The Haftarah, it showed that how faith actually moves us into his promises. Amazing, isn't it? Romans 4 speaks about the confidence that we have, that God is in control. As with Avram, being fully convinced that God is able to do whatever he promises. And that needs to be our focus. Now God, he's in charge. So I can put my feet off the accelerator and the steering wheel in his hands, and he will take us where he wants to. Utterly disheartened by the spies' evil reports, Bnei Israel fell into despair, having chosen to listen to the wrong voices, rebelled against Moshe and refused to enter Canaan. Their rebellion and their failure to enter the land is the subject of the commentary in Hebrews 3-4, which quotes from Tehillim or Psalms 95:7-11. Today, if you hear my voice, for he is our God and we are his people and the people of his pasture, the flock of his hand. And today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart as in Meribah, as in the day of Massah in the wilderness. When your fathers tested me, they challenged me, even though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation. So I said, it is a people whose heart goes astray, who do not know my ways. Therefore I swore in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. Which voice have we been listening to recently? Have I been obedient to that voice? The writer of Hebrews warns the believers reading his epistle that just as Yahweh did not spare the generation in the wilderness, neither would he spare the current generation. He compares entering the land to entering faith in Messiah Yeshua. Both Messiah and the entrance into the land, they came as a culmination of the covenant promises and require faith and obedience. Those who disobeyed were not able to enter because of unbelief. That's in Hebrews. It says we have believed we who have believed enter the rest. Just as he says, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter the rest. But what is rest, which they were not able to enter? Hebrews, the writer, points out that Yahweh's rest began on Shabbat, following creation, and it has never ceased. He did not go back to work creating on the first day, on the Yom Rishon, Sunday. Therefore, Shabbat rest of God is an eternal Shabbat rest. It's the rest of the world to come. Therefore remains a Shabbat rest for God's people. And it is something more than merely the seventh day Shabbat. It's something more than merely the promised land. The generation in the wilderness is used as a type, an example. And the writer of Hebrews says, if we also have had good news proclaimed to us, just as they did, but the word that they heard did not help them because they were not unified with those who listened in faith. So from the perspective of the writer of Hebrews, the situation is similar to that of generation about to enter the land. The entrance into the promised land and the message of the Messiah are similar because just like the promised land, Messiah Yeshua is the completion of the whole Torah. And everything's been leading up to this point. And just like the imminent entering into the promised land, the believers he was writing to were poised on the edge of the world to come in Yeshua. The Olam Haba, the world to come. In Hebrews 2 verse 15. Important to know that it says, are you ready and waiting with great anticipation for the world to come? It's important that all of us make sure that we're not leaving anything to doubt or anything that actually causes us to miss it. And that's why it's important that we actually live in holiness and righteousness. So when he speaks, we need to listen. We need to act on it. We need to follow it through. And then the things that will happen will be in accordance with his will and purpose for our lives. So enjoy it. Don't always look at what may have been or what might be, but enjoy the things that he's already provided and make the most of it and enjoy it. Shabbat Shalom.
Challenging and encouraging. It gives you something to chew on, doesn't it? stand together for the blessing.
Yevrechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Yireh Adonai panav alecha v'chunecha. Yisha Adonai panav alecha v'chunecha v'chunecha. V'yashem lecha, v'yashem lecha, shalom. Go in his peace, joy, walking in him, listening, opening your ears and eyes and heart to his ways. Being his light, being his example, and leading people to the light. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Oh, it's great. I think this might be